The dead night. The storm hit Ashford County without warning, turning the October sky into a churning mass of black clouds that seemed to press down on the earth itself. Sarah Mitchell gripped the steering wheel tighter as rain hammered against her windshield, reducing visibility to almost nothing. She should have stayed at the Conference Hotel, but the thought of her daughter Emma waiting at home had pushed her onto the highway despite the weather warnings. Come on, she muttered, leaning forward as her headlights barely cut through the darkness. The digital clock on her dashboard read 11:47 p.m. The dead of night, her grandmother would have called it. The hour when the veil between worlds grows thin. A sharp crack of lightning illuminated the road ahead, and Sarah's breath caught. Standing in the middle of the highway was a figure, pale, motionless, wearing what looked like a white hospital gown. She slammed on the brakes, her car hydroplaning across the wet asphalt before coming to a shuddering stop just feet from a person. Her heart thundered in her chest as she stared through the rain-streaked windshield. The figure hadn't moved, hadn't even flinched when her car nearly struck them. Sarah's phone had no signal. It hadn't for the past 20 miles. She was alone on this stretch of rural highway, with nothing but cornfields stretching endlessly on either side. She hit her horn. Once. Twice. The figure remained statue still. Jesus, she breathed, unbuckling her seat belt. Every instinct screamed at her to drive around and keep going. But what if this person was hurt? Disoriented? She couldn't leave someone stranded in a storm like this. Sarah grabbed her phone to use as a flashlight and stepped out into the deluge. The rain was cold, immediately soaking through her blazer. "Hey!" she called out, shielding her eyes. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The figure turned its head, slowly, unnaturally slowly, to face her. In the glow of her headlights, Sarah could see it was a woman with long, dark hair plastered to her face. But something was wrong. The woman's skin had a bluish tint, and her eyes. Sarah's blood turned to ice. The woman's eyes were completely black, like pools of oil reflecting nothing. "Help me," the woman said, her voice a wet whisper that somehow carried over the storm. "Please help me. I'm so cold." Sarah took an involuntary step backward. What happened to you? Were you in an accident?" The woman began walking toward her, her movements jerky and wrong, like a marionette with tangled strings. So cold in the water. Help me get warm." "Stop, just stop right there," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I'll call for help, But her phone was useless. No signal, no help coming. The woman kept advancing, her bare feet slapping against the wet pavement. "Why did you leave me there? Why didn't you save me?" "I don't know you," Sarah said, backing toward her car. "I've never seen you before." "Liar." The word came out as a shriek that seemed to tear through the night. The woman's mouth opened impossibly wide, and Sarah saw that her throat was filled with water, dark water that poured out over her chin. "You drove past. You saw the car in the river. You saw it and you kept driving." Sarah's mind reeled. 3 weeks ago, she'd been driving home late, exhausted from a double shift. She'd seen what looked like skid marks leading toward the old bridge over Coldwater Creek. For a moment, she'd thought about stopping, but there were no other cars, no obvious signs of distress. She convinced herself she was seeing things, that she was too tired. She'd kept driving. "Oh, God," Sarah whispered. "The bridge." "You went off the bridge." I screamed and screamed. The woman said, still advancing. Water continued to pour from her mouth, soaking the hospital gown until it clung to her gaunt frame. The water was so cold, so dark. I watched my phone's light fade as it sank, watched the bubbles stop coming, watched everything go black. Sarah fumbled for her car door handle, her hand slipping on the wet metal. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "Now you'll know," the woman said, and suddenly she was running, moving with impossible speed, her mouth stretched into that horrible gaping hole. Sarah threw herself into the car and slammed the door, hitting the lock button frantically. The woman crashed against the driver's side window, her black eyes inches from Sarah's face. Water streamed down the glass, not rain, but creek water, smelling of rotten mud. "Let me in," the woman hissed, her breath fogging the glass despite the rain. "Let me in and I'll show you. I'll show you what it's like to drown in the dark." Sarah turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered. Died. No, 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 she chanted, turning it again. The woman began pounding on the window, her fists leaving wet impressions that didn't fade. Sarah could see that her fingernails were torn off, the flesh beneath gray and waterlogged. The engine caught. Sarah threw the car into drive and pressed the accelerator, but the woman was impossibly strong. She held on to the door, her body dragging alongside the car as Sarah picked up speed. Through the window, those black eyes never blinked, never looked away. "You can't outrun death," the woman said, her voice somehow clear even over the engine and the storm. "You can't outrun guilt." Sarah swerved violently, and the woman finally lost her grip, rolling away into the darkness. In her rearview mirror, Sarah saw the figure stand up in the middle of the road, water pouring from her like a fountain, before the night swallowed her completely. Sarah drove like a woman possessed, pushing a car to its limits. Her entire body shook with adrenaline and terror. What was that thing? The woman from the creek. It had to be. But how? How was any of this possible? Her headlights caught a reflective sign. Coldwater Creek Bridge, 1 mile. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn around, to find another route. But this was the only road home. The only way back to Emma. Sarah pressed on, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The bridge emerged from the darkness, its rusted metal frame looking skeletal in the lightning flashes. Sarah's car rolled onto the old wooden planks, and immediately she heard it, a sound that made her stomach drop. Water, rushing water. But the creek was far below, wasn't it? She looked down at her feet and screamed. Water was seeping up through the floorboards, not regular water, but dark, murky water filled with bits of algae and mud. It rose quickly, covering her shoes, her ankles, creeping up her calves with shocking coldness. "No!" Sarah shouted, stomping on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, but the bridge seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, the other side always just out of reach. The water kept rising, past her knees now, filling the car with the stench of decay. Sarah could feel things in the water, soft, sliding things that brushed against her legs. In the passenger seat, water began to pool and rise, forming into a shape. Sarah watched in horror as a woman materialized beside her, water streaming from every pore, her hospital gown floating in the fluid that now filled the car to chest level. "This is what it was like," the woman said softly, almost gently. "This is what you let happen to me." Sarah's car was sinking. She realized. The bridge was gone. She was driving in the creek itself, water pouring in from every direction. She clawed at her seat belt, but it wouldn't release. The water reached her chin. "I'm sorry," Sarah gasped, taking what she was sure would be her last breath. "I'm so sorry." The woman reached out with one waterlogged hand and touched Sarah's face. Her fingers were ice cold, and where they made contact, Sarah felt something shift. In a rush of terrible clarity, she experienced it all, the moment of the crash, the car tumbling into the dark water, the panic, the desperate attempt to escape, the crushing pressure, the burning in the lungs, the final acceptance of death. "Remember me," the woman whispered. "Don't let it happen again." The water closed over Sarah's head. Sarah jolted awake, gasping and choking. She was in her car, pulled over on the shoulder of the highway. The storm still raged outside, but she was dry. Completely dry. The clock read 11:47 p.m. With shaking hands, she grabbed her phone. One bar of signal. She dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "The bridge," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "Coldwater Creek Bridge. There's a car in the water. There's someone trapped. Please, you have to send help now." After she hung up, Sarah sat in the darkness, listening to the rain. She didn't know if what she'd experienced was real or some kind of vision, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never ignore those instincts again. Never drive past when something felt wrong. Never let fear of involvement outweigh human life. She pulled back onto the highway, driving carefully through the storm. As she crossed Coldwater Creek Bridge, solid, real, unchanged, she whispered a prayer for the woman in the water. Behind her, in the darkness, a pale figure stood at the bridge's edge, watching. Then, like morning fog, she faded away. The dead of night had given Sarah a second chance. Some people weren't so lucky.